Welcome to The Blast Zone, the podcast where we dig up the bombs that shook Hollywood and try to find out why they went up in flames. This week, You Are My Sunshine, the movie Sunshine. You lost some money, but you're still good. This is Sunshine. Welcome to The Blast Zone.
Welcome to The Blast Zone.
We are not a podcast about bad movies. We are a podcast about movies that did badly.
That's right.
I am Jon Drake, in-house film critic of my Letterboxd account.
And I'm Ian Dukes. I'm a person with thoughts and feelings, and some of them are about movies.
Movies like Sunshine, which we're talking about today. Very exciting. The sun is shining as we're recording a little earlier than normal today. We usually record at nighttime.
Special treat.
But Ian, how are you doing this week? What's going on?
I got a little sunshine. I actually went outside and took a walk today. First time in, like a year, which sounds very unhealthy. So I'm trying to reverse that trend in my personal health. You know, the journey of 100 steps starts with 10 steps. I did more than 10, but it was a short walk, and I hope to do more. I kind of liked it.
I love how you shortened the first part of that saying and lengthened the second part. Isn't it like a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step? So
I wanted to just narrow the whole boundaries. So I did a short journey, but there's room to grow.
We're keeping our aim relatively low.
Shoot for the sun and you'll land on the moon, they say.
That's not scientifically sound at all. That's terrible advice. They have wildly different trajectories. If you shot for the sun and missed, you'd probably just burn to a crisp, as we'll find out here. Your shields won't be able to adapt quickly enough.
No, they'll be pointing the wrong way.
It's a big problem. It comes up a lot. Only in the world of Sunshine. But before we start talking about this movie that I'm very excited to talk about because it's honestly a vibe. What did you watch this week that you thought would be interesting to share with the listeners?
I brought a fun little movie that's also kind of a vibe. It's called The Northman.
Not The Northman?
Not The Northman. I struggle with that. I look at it on the page. I go, that's the Northman.
Like the North Star? Is he the guy who points that way?
He's pretty far north. So if you're looking at him, you're on the right track. I struggled with the Batman the same way until I learned to say it correctly. You know, we're big fans of Robert Eggers. The Witch was awesome. The Lighthouse was just a transcendent movie for me. I really like that. This movie was way more traditional than I expected in terms of it's like a traditional myth. It's very orderly. It's very straight ahead.
It's got a linear kind of storyline.
You can see where it's going from the start because it's this archetypal myth. And it's also kind of Shakespearean, but it's still a fun ride. There's a lot to sink your teeth into. It's visually very cool. It's very enjoyable. But you know what? It lacked the disorienting, oh my God, where is this going vibe of Eggers' other movies that freak you out and make you wonder where could this end up. So this movie it's less of a nightmare and it's more of a bedtime story where it's not to say that it doesn't have any surprises. And I liked it, but I wasn't rewarded in the deep way that I was with his other films.
I know he mentioned this is the first time he's had to deal with things like studio notes and test screenings because he was given the keys to the kingdom in a sense here. You know, he's used to working with budgets that are much smaller. What did this cost? $90 million, I think was the reported budget for it. When you're dealing with that kind of money, the studio's going to have some feedback for you that you're going to have to listen to. And he did. And obviously, sorry to say, The Northman future episode, it's clearly a bomb at this point. There's no shot for it to make back any money.
Yeah, that's too bad.
I wonder where he goes from here. He's definitely not going to get $90 million for his next movie, but I hope he can still do things with the freedom and the kind of creative liberty that he's been granted for his past movies. He said he has no interest in making a movie set in the present day. He has no interest in making a movie for like a big multiversal universe, like the Marvel universe, the DC universe. He does not want any part of that. So he's pigeonholed himself into, well, you got to go back to making these weird character studies that are part drama, part horror. If you can get Neon or A24 to give you another like $8 million, then have at it. But he's not going to get $90 million again. And that's kind of a bummer.
But you know what? There was absolutely nothing wrong with those movies that he did for low to medium budgets that were these passion projects that he threw himself into that no one else could do. So I don't know. That might be the right trajectory. Like you don't have to go big in Hollywood and mega. At least I don't need that from him. I would love another Lighthouse. I would be thrilled to death.
My worry is that we're kind of on the frontier of the new Hollywood. And it feels like some filmmakers are going to get left in the dust or kind of slip through the cracks of this new system where they're like Netflix is shying away from financing movies now unless they're big swings that they're sure are going to pay off. It just feels like we're losing ground for these kind of niche filmmakers. So I do worry about guys like him and where their place will be. That being said, I have all the faith in the world in his talents, and I'm sure he'll bounce back if he's given a chance. So just going to follow his career very closely and hope for the best. But it's interesting you brought up small character-driven dramas, small to mid-budget, because that's what I have have for this week. I just got out of the movie theater. I saw Top Gun Maverick.
Oh,
I don't know if you heard of it. It's a little art house movie.
that sounds like a fun little indie to check out. How was it?
Full disclosure, I am not a Top Gun head. I'm not one of these super fans of the original movie. I think it's fine. I enjoy it. I want to rewatch it now because I didn't do the homework and rewatch it ahead of this viewing. It's probably been 10 years since I've seen it. But again, it's never been a movie that left a huge impression on me. But I think Maverick is better. And maybe it's just better because of it's filling a void that we lack in Hollywood right now. Even though it's a sequel, I don't consider it like a huge IP.
Because it lay dormant for years.
Right, for 30 years. There hasn't been a ton of tie-in stuff going on. There hasn't been like graphic novels and comic books and animated series released in the meantime. It just really was a property that was laying there for however many decades with no movement. So it feels like an underdog in that sense almost, even with Tom Cruise in the starring role and whatever the $300 million budget was or whatever it's reported at. It rules. Like, it's so much fun. Cool. It's rousing. It's got a great cast. Jon Hamm just doing work as like the buttoned up, stuffy admiral.
Nice.
That has to give out all the bad news and be like the stick in the mud, which is like, it's Jon Hamm. Like, he's capable of so much more, but I'm glad he's still doing this stuff. Miles Teller is likable in this movie, which is just that's an accomplishment in of itself. Even when I like him in movies, it's because he's leaning into his little douchebag persona, like in Whiplash. Jennifer Connelly playing the love interest, not Kelly McGillis reprising her role. It's the only downside. I guess things did not work out between Charlie and Maverick, but you can't win them all. And Jennifer Connelly is more than capable of playing a great love interest at this stage in her career, and she does an admirable job. Admirable. How's that wordplay? That was completely by accident.
Ham was admiral and Connelly was admirable.
Yeah, I highly recommend it. You probably don't need me to say that at this point. If you wanted to see it in the theater and you feel comfortable going to the movie theater, you've probably seen it already. But it's a wild ride. It's a lot of fun. It's a movie that feels out of time. Like, it's going to be rewatchable in 30 years, I think.
That's neat to hear. To me, the odds were so against this movie being any good at all. Like, okay, you make a blockbuster, and yes, you should probably follow it up with a sequel, and no, you shouldn't fall asleep and get entombed in ice for 30 years and then get thawed out and then try to make it as if nothing happened. So it was like kind of a crazy idea. And everyone, including you, is saying this thing is just a quality movie. Nostalgia aside, that's pretty impressive. It's hard to do. And now I'm actually inspired to see it because I, like you, was like, yeah, Top Gun, whatever. Now I'm like, oh, good movie. I like a good movie. I don't care that it's Top Gun. I want to see it.
Completely removed from any allegiance to the original movie, which I have none. It's just solid, good fun. And you don't really need a lot of information about the original to go in and get what's going on really fast. They do a good job explaining everything you need without having long exposition-filled speeches. It's pretty crafty the way they fill in the gaps. Obviously, it'll be a richer experience if you're familiar with at least the main beats of Top Gun, but you can go in blind, I think, and still figure out what's going on and have fun.
That's another sign of a good movie. It just gets its work done.
But we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about Sunshine, the Danny Boyle 2007 sci-fi epic. Ian, we've gotten a few comments on the Twitter when I announced this was the movie for next week that, like, I have never even heard of this movie. I like Danny Boyle. I like sci-fi. How did I not hear about this movie? Did you know about this movie? Were you familiar with it? Or what's your take on it?
Well, I never saw this movie, but I was aware of it, and I'll tell you why and how. It's a little bit of an Ian tidbit, if you will indulge me. Back in 2006, I had to look this up. I was working for a Fox label called Fox Atomic, doing web design for them, and they were run by Peter Rice, who was also in charge of Fox Searchlight, who made this movie. And so he was around. He was, in fact, standing behind my desk one day, along with Andrew McDonald, the producer of this film, touring the office. I think they were both involved in getting 28 Weeks Later off the ground, which...
Days or weeks?
Weeks. Weeks was in production at that time, and it came out through Fox Atomic. Danny Boyle didn't direct the second one, but he was an executive producer on it.
Yeah, he was heavily involved by all accounts.
Anyway, so like it was around. I was in this place where people who were making this movie were hanging out. And I managed not to see it because that's just how dumb I am with movies. But I waited till now, and it was really a rewarding experience. We'll obviously get into it now, but like I'm glad I got to go into it fresh with very little preconceived notion at this point, and I really came out enjoying it.
We need an Ian Tidbit sound, some kind of...
a little jingle to get us in.
Yeah, like just somebody screaming Tidbit at the top of their lungs.
Tidbit!
You sprinkle these in throughout our episodes, and they're always some of the most popular bits that we have. He'll just be like, oh, we're doing, this movie next week. And he's like, oh, I never saw it, but I composed the entire soundtrack for it. When I'm blind, I never watched the movie. I happened to just do the whole score.
I built the sets for that one summer when I was a carpenter.
I had my hammer, my little saw, and I just built the sets, but I never saw the movie. It's always a fun time to hear how you're tangentially related to all these films we cover.
As we say, I always say, I don't remember anything that happened in my life, but this thing popped up too. I'm like, oh, start to think about the time frame. I looked up the dates. I'm like, yeah, that all fits together, and kind of pieced the memories together in my mind.
We're glad you did, because it's a movie that I didn't see in theaters either. And we'll get into the fact that I don't think anyone in America saw it in theaters, really, unless you were like tuned into the independent theater circuit and you knew these art house theaters that were showing it for a couple weeks, as it were. But I remember seeing a trailer for it and being very intrigued because, you know, it's hard sci-fi. I'm a young boy at the time. You know, I enjoy hard sci-fi. The trailer has the Requiem for a Tower song from, I don't even know if it's ever been in a movie, but it's from Trailers the World Across.
Yeah.
You know the one I'm talking about, right? Like, do.
Yes.
Do. I'll put it in the show notes.
Yes, that's total trailer music. I watched the trailer too. I'm like, oh, that song's not in the movie, but that song is in so many trailers.
Is that song in any movie?
I don't know. It's a good trivia question.
It's in a bajillion trailers, though. It was in one of the Lord of the Rings trailers, this trailer. I think it was in 28 Weeks Later, maybe. I think it was in Requiem for a Dream. I'm going to try to find out if it's in any movies or if it's just a trailer song, but it's a banger. Let's be honest. That song fucking rules. And it's great trailer music because it's emotive to the point of being manipulative. Like, you can't help but have a reaction to it.
It pumps you up. It's in that Carmina Burana league of classical things that get you hyped.
And dare I say, Adagio in D minor might belong in that same pantheon when we talk about it a little later, because that song is another great one that's been used in a lot of other things since this movie came out. It was written for this movie, but used in other stuff.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so I remember seeing the trailer and being very excited, and then like just came and went, and there was no way for me to see it. I lost interest, and then I saw it on sale as a Blu-ray a few years later, and I was like, oh, that movie, I remember that movie. It looked good. And I bought it, and I watched it, and I was like, oh yeah, it was good. I don't know why this didn't get more of a release, because
that's a nice find.
I like this movie. And yeah, it's not a perfect movie for sure. We're going to have to talk about some of the ways in which it fails, but we'll probably spend much more time on its successes because it does a lot of things right. And Danny Boyle is a director. I don't know that he's capable of making like a truly bad movie. I think he can make movies that miss the mark, but he'll never make a bad movie.
I may be more of a jerk about this movie because, as I said right off the top, I'm a fan of it, but also had a hard time with the logic because it comes at you. It's like, this is going to be a hard sci-fi movie. It's very straight ahead. Everything looks real. Everyone's acting real. But then they do a lot of dumb stuff. I'm like, no one would do that. How did that happen? And it piles up real quick. And so I will point out the various plot points that frustrated me from that standpoint, because that's what happens to my mind. I'd crave hard sci-fi that my brain won't poke holes in, or at least has enough juice that my brain will suspend disbelief, right? Like, okay, that didn't make sense, but fuck it, because it's so fun. This movie almost gets to the fuck it, this is so fun level. Sometimes it does, but at other points, I'm like, no, this is supposed to be the serious stuff, and you guys aren't acting serious. And so I get a little persnickety.
I don't know if there's any section of this movie I would call fun. I think this movie exists in two planes, and one is like awe-inspiring visually and audibly.
Auditorially?
Yeah, like visually and auditorially, this movie is stunning. It's never fun. There's almost no humor in it. It's very heavy. And then it veers into this weird third act, a huge topic of discussion on the internet about, is this movie ruined by its third act? I wouldn't say it's ruined, but it's definitely decreased in estimation due to its third act. Spoiler alert, I don't think it ruins it, but it does send it into some weird territory that I don't think the movie's quite equipped to handle it.
It's definitely that feeling of two different movies, and a lot of our analysis of movies throughout this podcast are like, okay, what kind of movie is this? What are they trying to do? And when it becomes too many different movies in one, it gets harder and harder to swallow.
Do you want me to get into my spiel about how the movie got made? I probably won't be telling you anything you don't know because you are involved in the production of this movie, apparently, as per usual.
I was in all the production meetings, but again, I don't remember them very well. So why don't you tell us how this thing happened?
All right. You correct me at any point if you remember things differently from
I'll jump in if a memory comes back to me.
All right. Peanut butter and jelly, chicken and waffles, Danny Boyle and Alex Garland. Some pairings just make sense. Their collaborations date back to the year 2000, when Boyle would direct his fourth feature, the Leonardo DiCaprio drama The Beach, which had been adopted by John Hodge from a Garland novel of the same name. The movie was financially successful but divisive among critics, and their next team-up would be even more fruitful as Boyle went straight to the source and had Garland write the script for low-budget, post-apocalyptic zombie horror film 28 Days Later. The film would be a hit both critically and commercially, boosting both of their standings in Hollywood.
You could say they became all the rage.
Boyle would opt for lighter fare with his follow-up directing the dramedy Millions in 2004, but would reunite with Garland for his next movie, an ambitious sci-fi horror project, which is centered on an international team on a mission to restart the sun by shooting a missile at it. If that sounds a lot like the plot of future episode The Core, well, yeah. But this movie's way better than that one. Garland was inspired to write the script after reading about the theoretical heat death of the universe. Titled Sunshine and originally pitched to 20th Century Fox, the film would eventually be financed by a combination of Fox Searchlight and outside funding secured by producer Andrew McDonald. 20th Century Fox explained their reluctance resources to finance the movie as cold feet due to the financial disaster that was 2002's Steven Soderbergh sci-fi drama Solaris. With a $40 million budget secured, sets were being built at 3 Mill Studio in East London, and Boyle went about putting together an all-star cast for the film.
And the biggest star he cast was the son.
With Cillian Murphy, Chris Evans, and Rose Byrne secured as the leads, Boyle decided to have the small cast live together in order to build a sense of camaraderie and familiarity among the cast that would translate on screen. The cast underwent space and scuba training and even visited a nuclear submarine to get familiar with claustrophobic living conditions. Filming would begin in August 2005 and last about 4 months, and then it was on to the lengthy post-production. While most filmmakers would work with several effects houses for a movie with this quantity of special effects shots, Boyle worked exclusively with London's moving picture company to better manage quality control and preserve continuity.
Hey, was that sunspot there or was it a little to the left?
Released on April 6, 2007 in the UK, and getting a limited theatrical release starting on July 20th of the same year in the US, Sunshine was a critical hit, currently holding a 77% on Rotten Tomatoes, with most negative reviews of the film focusing on the wild tonal shift in the movie's third act. The movie was a financial failure though, recouping only $32 million, but it has gone on to become a modern-day sci-fi classic, a kind of thinking man's Event Horizon, and maintains a sizable fan base to this day.
It's wild to think about. This is Danny Boyle dipping his toe in sci-fi, and this movie is what he produced. First of all, it looks amazing. Like we were talking about his wrangling the special effects house to produce the visuals. They're so good. And like
so good. Yeah.
And for a guy who was just like, you know what? I didn't really know how sci-fi works. I had to learn a lot during the production of this. And it's like, well, you learned pretty fast, buddy, because you made a sci-fi movie that looks amazing.
And then afterwards, he was like, and I'm never doing it again. No, thank you. It was too much work, too much special effects. Never again. I'll stick to my dramas. He dropped out of Bond. Maybe that's why. He didn't want to do all the special effects. Who knows? But you could have told me this movie had a $100 million budget, and I would not have batted an eye at you.
Yeah, it's so convincing. I can't think of another movie where the main thing that you're looking at is the sun. There's a lot of movies where you look at spaceships that look cool.
Staring at the sun.
This movie is right up there in terms of looking at the spaceships. But then the rest of what they do that looks spacey is opening the big old view window up and checking out the sun, and it looks amazing.
Kind of going crazy.
It drives you nuts, but you can believe it because in the theater on a big screen, that would probably drive the audience nuts.
God, I'm so bummed I didn't get to see this on a big screen because I bet those shots are incredible. Even just the shots of, what is it, Mercury they fly by in the first like 10 minutes of the movie?
Yeah.
You know, like, you guys want to see Mercury? And I'm like, yeah, I do. It's like he's talking to the audience.
Exactly.
And then you just get some really stunning visuals in this movie that are just super impressive. Rewatching it, I was stunned because I've recently rewatched Event Horizon at kind of the similarities between the two. There's a lot. We're going to have to go through them as we go through the synopsis, right?
Yeah, in all kinds of ways. But I guess, Danny Boyle said that he was coming at this movie and recognizing the tradition that he was following, going back to 2001 and a number of other movies where it's like you've got a ship, a crew, a signal, and everything changes. And that's what this is. It's a template, but it's one that's tried and true. And this is a pretty good iteration of it.
Do you want to get into the story?
Sure. So 8 astronauts are aboard the Icarus II. Their mission is to fly real close to the sun and drop in a humongous nuclear bomb in hopes to revive the sun's fading fire and save all mankind from a cold, dark fate. As the ship moves into the dead zone of no contact with Earth, there's already tension amongst the crew. Then they hear a distress signal coming from the Icarus I, an identical mission that went missing 7 years before. With input from the mission's physicist, Kappa, played by Cillian Murphy, they decide to alter their course to rendezvous with the Icarus I. What follows is a series of mishaps. The solar shields are damaged, the ship's captain is killed during the spacewalk to fix them, and the sun exposure caused by their maneuvering knocks out their communications and burns up their greenhouse, destroying their supply of food and oxygen.
Man.
Wah, wah.
It's like actions have consequences or something.
Yeah. It's almost a comedy of errors. Like the movie takes it all very seriously because it is for the crew.
And for everyone back on Earth.
Exactly. We're all hoping that they don't fuck up.
The stakes could not be higher.
And they're all yelling at each other. We can't make these decisions lightly. Everything is dead serious. And then it's like, I fucked up. And then things just fucking start stepping on rakes. And
poor Benedict Wong playing Trey. He gets the brunt of it.
And he's really good at this. I didn't even recognize him. Many people will know him as Wong and the Doctor Strange and Spider-Man Marvel multiverse. He's much younger in this movie, and he's really good. He's got this role that guy just fucks up and it ruins him.
Is anyone not really good in this movie, though? Like, this cast is awesome, and I think they all put in pretty good performances, except maybe Mark Strong, but that's kind of a unique bar to live up to.
Yeah, the cast is stacked, and I enjoyed them all.
You got Cillian Murphy, Rose Byrne, Chris Evans, Cliff Curtis, Michelle Yeoh, Hiroyuki Sanada, Benedict Wong, Troy Garity. All right, Troy Garity might be the odd man out in terms of he never really really became a big star after this.
I don't know that I know him from other stuff. I read that he's Jane Fonda's son.
Nepotism, baby. That makes sense. But he's been on stuff I've seen. Nothing jumps out of me. I guess he's been a regular on Ballers for many years until it was canceled, which I never watched. But he's got some credits to his name. He's been on stuff. He was in Gangster Squad future episodes. That'll be fun.
Oh, nice.
He's been a working actor for many years, but he's not a name. But the rest of this cast is pretty much all like people that could top line movies in this day and age. And they're just part of an ensemble, which is just super strong. I guess when the cast is small, you can really get the best of the best. And some of them were either what people thought were past their prime at the time or a little before their prime, we'd come to find out. But still, it's a fun time capsule to go back and revisit. Like this cast would have cost a crazy amount of money today.
It's really cool to see. And we talk about parallels with Event Horizon. For me, there's also parallel with The Thing, another favorite episode of ours,
Yes.
because it's about a crew isolated, encapsulated in a bottle for the length of the movie. And they also are an ensemble. There's some standout performances, but they don't take time to develop everybody's backstory. Just like in this movie, everyone's just working their job and we're watching them do it. And I think we agreed that that really worked in The Thing. It felt real. And I like that in Sunshine too.
Yeah, they don't give us flashbacks to their life before on Earth. They don't give us a lot of long expository dialogue about, oh, you're just lashing out because whatever, you missed your kid's birthday.
Right.
You know, they just trust us to intuit these interpersonal relationships that have been formed and learn the character of each crew member by their actions as opposed to backstory. And when you have a good writer and a good director and good actors, you can do that and it works.
And it works for Cillian because of his gigantic eyes. Boyle puts them on screen in extreme close-up and you're like, okay, I like this guy. I didn't even know I liked Cillian Murphy until this movie, and he got up close to the screen and he was just charming, recording a message to send back home to his family. And I'm like, you know what? I like this guy. And the movie works because he's the most human one and he's the one you end up identifying with. And I felt like he really carries it, his humanity.
It's a little off-putting how much he sounds like Matt Damon when he's doing an American accent, though. I don't know if you noticed this.
Not until after you said that to me. And then on the second watch, I'm like, you're right. It could be distracting.
Especially when he's doing voiceover, or I guess he's recording his message back to Earth, but you don't
Yeah.
see him recording it. So it acts as a voiceover. I was like, wow. Cillian Murphy clearly watched Good Will Hunting a few times and he was working on his American accent because it's almost distracting.
There's definitely people's American accents that feel slightly crooked. And this one felt comfortable to me.
I mean, I've seen him be an American more often than I've seen him be an Irishman or an Englishman. He's from Ireland originally, so I think he's got it down pretty well now. But 2007 was a long time ago, many Peaky Blinders episodes ago. I did find it, naming your ship the Icarus for a mission to fly into the sun. It feels like you're tempting fate a little bit, doesn't it?
It does. It's foreshadowing, if nothing else. But I feel like that's a sci-fi thing you've got to do. You got to give your ship a name that makes people go, oh boy, I think I know what's happening.
For our listeners that are not familiar with the myth of Icarus, he's a person who built himself wax wings so he could fly into the sun, and it went fine. There was zero consequences, no repercussions.
Yeah, we had an awesome time.
So it all worked out. And then after the first one doesn't work, you just go Icarus 2. No Prometheus. No, Prometheus would make more sense because you're trying to create fire.
Yeah,
right?
bring it back to Earth. That would be good.
I'm not a mythology major. I'm just spitballing here. I did like Boyle's choice to not cut back to Earth to show the conditions that humans are living in. They just tell us it might have been a budgetary restraint, but it does isolate you the same way the crew is isolated and you feel one with them. You're up here. You have no idea what's going on back home. You just have to fly blind and hope it's not past the point of no return yet.
It's one of many stylistic choices that he makes, and his instincts are very good. It's nice to see when you have a good filmmaker making a film like this where the script is maybe not perfect, you still see these interesting things happen. And yeah, it does help you feel like you don't get to question things. And I think it also has a practical effect that there's no mission control getting back to them. There's nobody that's, oh, here's the famous scientist who came up with the whole idea. That person doesn't exist in this movie, so there's no one to bounce the ideas off of. It's just us 8 people.
It's a good storytelling device. It also feels faithful to the science involved. This first act is just really good. You're getting glimpses of the enormity of their mission. Everything is introduced very intelligently. And up until the point where shit starts going wrong, you're still on the edge of your seat just hoping the mission goes right. Like they've come up with a premise that's interesting on its own. So even without the added drama of something going wrong, you're invested.
Right. It's a high stakes premise and it sounds like a crazy idea, but you're like, this looks like a serious ship. They must have believed this could work. But there's some hint that things are going to get weird pretty quick. One of the first scenes is Cliff Curtis as Dr. Searle, the ship's psych officer, getting funky with the sun. What did you make of that?
Bad sign when your psych officer is already going a little space crazy. I think that's what they called it in Armageddon when Steve Buscemi goes space crazy. He's got space dementia. So Searles is just staring at the sun, trying to see how bright they can make the observation chamber before they burn their face off, essentially. And that's not really where you want your psych guy to be.
No.
You know, testing the limits of his psyche and body, just ritually for nothing, no gain.
And you're wondering, is it kind of sexual for him? His face is contorting in pleasure and he's taking these deep sighs and he puts his glasses on and says, oh yeah, give me the 3%, baby. And the computer blasts him with the view of the sun as much as he can handle.
I think it's 3.1%, they said, is the most you can turn it up without permanent damage to your retina.
And he's pushing the limits. And then strangely, 2 scenes later, the captain, who's supposed to be our serious button-down guy, Kaneda, he's in there doing the same thing. So you're like, wait a minute. We thought this was going to be the crazy guy that maybe, we have to worry about this guy as the movie proceeds. But now the captain's in there and he's getting weird.
I think Kappa's in there at one point too, doing the same shit.
Does he go in there to meet Kaneda or hanging out with Searle?
He's not alone, but he's still enraptured by what he's seeing. He might not be as obsessed with it as the other crew, but I feel like you can't walk into that room and not be immediately drawn to the sun to that degree.
But I think they're generally going space crazy because not only does Kaneda come in and do his own version of the sun bath, but on his downtime, he's watching video of the captain of the Icarus I, Pinbacker. He's got the transmissions from that guy and he's watching him over and over. And Pinbacker's saying some weird philosophical shit that he's spouting off and he's freeze framing and he's just staring into Pinbacker's eyes. They zoom in super close. And then like Harvey, the communications guy, is listening to his space chatter on his radio and he's putting his face into his green laser light cone that he uses and he's in a trance. So like everybody's weird. And then we'll get to Mace, who is
maybe the most normal of all of them. He seems like a dick in the beginning, but you come to realize he's just pragmatic, I guess.
Yeah, Chris Evans Mace is the guy who says all the real shit. He's the one who says out loud, oh shit, our psych officer is loonier than any of us. That's a bad sign. In Event Horizon Parallels, he's the Larry Fishburne character who says the shit that the audience is thinking.
I've always thought that Chris Evans is better in this type of role than he ever was playing like the buttoned up Captain America type. Even his earliest role I remember seeing him in was Not Another Teen Movie as Jake Weiler, where he's playing kind of a douche. He's almost too handsome to be humble. Don't try to force me to believe that he doesn't know that he's one of the best people on earth.
Yeah, he's a great dick all the way down the line. And we had him in the zone he's the skateboarding movie star in...
in Scott Pilgrim. He's leaning into that just douchebag chauvinist persona.
And it's super fun.
Knives Out, he's doing that too, and he's great at it. It looks like the Gray Man is going to be maybe a play on that. If you've watched the trailer from that, he's definitely not playing a Boy Scout like we've all become accustomed to with Captain America. So yeah, I was excited to see him in this role because this was pre anything Marvel. I don't think he'd even been in the first Captain America yet. Yeah, he hadn't been. That was in like 2011. So he was an exciting actor back then that you didn't really know where he would go. Not to say that I'm disappointed where his career's gone, but so much of it's been taken up by playing one character that now that he's done with that, I'm excited again to see what he does with the latter half of his career.
He's got a lot of runway to do some fun stuff. And in this, I like the journey of his character because he starts out actually further gone than anybody in terms of doing crazy shit. He's having a fist fight with Kappa over, you took too long in the recording booth and now I can't send my message back home. And
which is fucked up because it's probably the last message you're going to send. So it's totally understandable.
It's understandable that you would get mad, but that you would have a real and dangerous physical confrontation on the ship where the mission is the fate of all humanity and you might just break the physicist's jaw and put him out of commission. So he's more crazy than anybody at the start of this because it's, dude, you're gone too far. What the fuck? And then he actually shapes up. He gets a haircut. He shaves his beard. He looks clean cut. He pulls himself together, whereas other people start to fall apart.
He looks eerily like Ian Somerhalder when he has long hair and a beard from Lost. But yeah, when he shaves it, he looks like Chris Evans. But yeah, no, he's great. The last thing we have to talk about in this section is the spacewalk. And that deserves a little bit of time because another visually really impressive sequence. Kaneda and Kappa getting in the gold spacesuits that look like old diver suits from the early days of deep sea diving.
Man, I love the suits. I'm like, gold, they're pulling them out. And then when they get out into space and they're glimmering in the darkness of space, it's cool. To me, the gold spacesuits are a high point of this movie, and they clearly know that there's something big because they come around 2 more times to gold spacesuits in 2 more key set piece scenes. I'm like, oh, that was such a good choice. They're so beautifully designed, and that really lifts the movie for me.
I am glad that in the later scenes, though, we don't have to sit through the whole putting the suit on sequence. They just go like, all right, time to put the suit on, and then they cut, and then the suit's on. Because it is quite a laborious process, and I was not ready to endure it again. But once I'm on board because, yeah, I do like seeing how this stuff all works. I did notice it looks like Kappa is about to lean in to kiss Cassie at one point during the suit putting on scene.
Yes.
And then it cuts away real fast. Apparently there was a romantic subplot developed in the movie that Danny Boyle just said, never mind.
Yeah, to your point that those getting dressed scenes are laborious, at least they use it to tell some story. Because I feel like very much that scene where Cassie is helping Kappa get into the suit, there's so much tenderness. Like she's putting his headband on, she's tucking his wires in, she's doing all this stuff. It's almost like a love scene, or it's like a very tender scene. It stops short of the kiss, but you still get the effect of the bond between these two people.
Another a bond that was trying to be formed between the scene was Cliff Curtis as Searle trying to get his rocks off as Kaneda is being burned alive in his suit.
Yeah,
what do you see?
It's pretty weird. He's fucking horned at that point. Searle is just holding the microphone going, what do you see? The same way you would say, what are you wearing? He's very much trying to get off on the captain's experience because he's getting the full fatal dose of the sun that Searle only wishes he could take.
Hiroyuki Sanada, actually, another repeat customer. We had him on as we talked about Army of the Dead, right?
Oh, okay. I didn't make the connection.
Yeah, he was Tanaka in that movie. He's fucking great. I will watch him in anything.
Great
presence.
presence.
Like he brings instant gravitas to any role. I remember him in the Last Samurai, which is a reviled movie, maybe undeservedly, but he was great in that movie. That was the first time I really took notice of him, and he's been in a ton of stuff since. But he's always a welcome sight until he's burnt alive.
Till he fries up. But before we move on, let's talk about how they got here. How did they get to where the captain is getting killed this quick into the movie? This is where I was like, bumping up against this. The choices they made.
Yeah.
First of all, they have this discussion. Should we go try to meet up with the Icarus One? And I don't know. I just imagine that space missions are planned down to the most minute detail by engineers, and then they're rehearsed. As they mentioned in this movie, we did this a million times in pre-flight training when she's putting on the suit. It's like all this stuff is worked out. All the contingencies are worked out. And then as soon as something goes wrong, they're like winging out vague ideas. Hey, 2 bombs is better than 1 bomb, right? Like
that's what I always say.
They're just like spitballing ideas. They're like, hey, what are we doing up here? What if we had another bomb? I guess that would be cool, right? Not even thinking about what if you take 10,000 crazy risks to get that second bomb. It's not worth it. And as soon as they take the risk, the movie spanks them. First of all, Mace spanks them. He's like, you guys are fucking idiots. You're not actually thinking of doing this. And we're like, yes, listen to Mace. He's very surly, but he's right. And they do it. And you're like, I can't believe they do it. And as soon as they do it,
everything goes right. And they get their second bomb. Nothing bad happens.
And the movie's over in 15 minutes. But it's a pretty happy ending. But no, that's when Trey fucks up. He's like, I had to turn off the computer and do all the calculations by hand. And I fucked up. I forgot to change one thing.
The angle of the shields, right?
The angle of the shields. But first of all, why is he the only one working on this? Fucking Kappa and Cassie are having a little snuggle time in their cabin on the other end of the ship.
They're all brilliant scientists. Like he might be the navigator or whatever his role is, but I'm sure they're all capable of doing some basic math on pen and paper.
Work together, check his work, help him out. The guy's alone and they find out that he did the wrong thing when they all come running from opposite ends of the ship. I'm like, you guys, this is the only thing you're doing is this bomb. Help the one guy who's doing all the math.
Instead, they just chant, you fucked up at him. Like, you fucked up, you fucked up.
And he's so broken up. But it's like, also, as soon as they get there, before he can even tell them the thing he forgot to do, Kappa goes, oh, you forgot to change the shield angle. And it's like, well, dude, if you would have been in the room with him, you could have told him that before they started turning and fucked up the ship. This is really like, this is where it stretched me. I'm like, oh, guys.
I was ready to defend the movie on its merits because I was like, well, at least they turned away from their initial mission to like get more security for their actual mission and not to save the lives of the people on the first Icarus.
Right.
But then you very eloquently ripped that all apart too, because spoiler alert, they get back on the Icarus too eventually, and like the bomb works just fine. So it was all for naught.
Yeah, they could have stuck with the original plan, like fucking Mace tried to tell you.
Yeah.
Anyway, more crazy shit happens, but this is where all the really bad decisions were made. Oh wait,
more crazy.
Hold on, I'm not done because there's one more bad decision.
Oh boy.
You would think they learned their lesson. Trey fucked up. They burned up the shields. The captain had to go out. He had to die to try to fix the shields. Then they're like, okay, well, we're doing this now. We're turning, and now we can go meet the Icarus One. And then Harvey, another sort of voice of reason, who's also a dick about it, so it's hard to be sympathetic to him.
He's more of a self-interest dick. Like he's looking out for himself more than the world. Mace is.
Exactly. He's not as likable in the end. But he's like, you guys, if you're turning the ship, the communications antenna is going to stick out past the edge of the shield at that angle. It's going to burn up. And they're like, shut up, you idiot. We don't give a shit about the antenna. Like nothing could go wrong with burning the antenna. We're not going to use it anyway because we're already fucked up at this point. And like, again, the script and the story spanks them all because, okay, it burns up the antenna. No big deal. They weren't going to use it. Immediately, the antenna reflects a beam of that same sunshine down into their greenhouse and just fucking torches the shit out of their greenhouse, which was an incredible, lush vegetable garden moments before. And now it's a fiery hell pit. And once again, you had 2 chances to learn that lesson and you fucked up both times.
But we do get some anguished Michelle Yeoh scenes
Poor
with
Michelle.
the garden, which is good. It's bad for the characters and humanity. Good for the filmmakers and the viewers because we get to see some good acting.
Yeah, poor Michelle. She gets her shit fucked up a lot. We'll get to that. But I think I've gotten out most of my anxiety about this movie. You want to take us into the second act and see if we can cruise through the happy parts?
Let's do it. The happy part. Where the fuck are the happy parts? This movie is grim. So already hobbled by their mishaps, the Icarus II manages to dock with the original Icarus and a team goes aboard. Inside, they find the old crew members' bodies burnt to ash, but they still can't explain what happened. On the good side, the ship's greenhouse is thriving, capable of producing the oxygen their ship now lacks. But catastrophe strikes again when the airlock connecting the ships is suddenly blown apart. As the only guy left who can work the bomb, Kappa is given the only available spacesuit to attempt to jump across open space back to the Icarus II. He survives, but 2 of the 3 others in the search party die in the effort. Now back aboard the Icarus II, Kappa and the last few others resume their original mission to detonate their payload.
I found a way to qualify by saying, why is this the happy part? We just said 2 of the 3 people die who go aboard. But 1, Harvey deserved it because he's an incredible asshole leading up to that. He's like, I'm the captain now. I get the space.
Give me the suit. I don't even care if I can't, do the calculations to make sure the bomb works. I'll figure it out as I go.
It's about me. Okay, dude, you're out of here. We're not going to miss you. And Searle gets his wish. He dies happy. He stays behind to operate the levers manually. Someone had to do it. And then he gets to go sit in the viewing chamber and finally get his full 100% dose of sun. And he finally gets off, I guess.
And how does he die? Also, Searle was pretty much gone by that point. He's covered in burns from staring at the sun for hours at a time. He was not coming home in his mental state. He would not have made it. He would not have been a functioning member of society anyway.
Yeah, he was a demented weirdo at this point.
He's pretty much gone. But yeah, I like that Harvey's death is not he doesn't get a heroic moment either. He just begrudgingly agrees, like, fine, we'll send Kappa in the spacesuit and I'll wrap myself in the space insulation. And then he just floats away. He bounces off a thing and just floats. And
yeah.
Like, all right, bye, Harvey. They didn't give him any kind of redemption. He begrudgingly goes along with the plan and then floats into space and freezes to death.
They're like, oh, Harvey. And he's freezing. And then they show his eyeball freezing over. And then he knocks into a little piece of antenna and it shatters one limb into a bunch of glittery blood ice. And then he finally, just to put the nail in the coffin, they show him going past the edge of the shield. And then he just fries up like a little bug hitting a bug zapper.
Bye, Harvey. I think he hits one line like, I lost Harvey. And then that's it. The rest is just for us to watch. But Mace makes it wrapped in his space insulation. Apparently scientifically accurate. You can survive out in space a lot longer than you thought. And getting some real Event Horizon, Larry Fishburne vibes from this section.
Yeah, again, a parallel. Jumping across space into airlocks.
To save a crew member that's not wearing a suit. Kind of interesting. Do you think Danny Boyle saw Event Horizon?
I mean, you'd certainly want to ask him if he did.
Are these enough cliches? Are these situations so standard for space sci-fi that they just happen to both crib from the same influences?
It's totally possible. And this is one of the other great set pieces of the movie. And it's really compelling. It's exciting and it's scary and it's done really well. So you're not really thinking about it at the time. Like, oh, I saw this in another movie. Because this version is thrilling on its own.
Yeah, I think this one wins the spacewalk battle. Event Horizon probably wins the creepy weirdo on the spaceship battle.
Yes.
What's his name? Dr.
Weir.
Dr. Weir is creepier and scarier than Pinbacker. Spoiler alert. But, at this point in the movie, we have to start comparing these things.
Yeah, we do. Spoiler alert, that airlock didn't blow itself up.
Yeah.
Somebody's nefarious hands were at work.
If you will. We should talk about the Icarus One a little bit.
Yeah.
You brought up a good point. There is quite a bit of dust on the Icarus One. And the crew is how many people?
I guess it's 7 or 8 people, right? Like this crew was 8, so we're thinking it's the same amount. And yeah, they go inside. They're like, oh, it's so dusty in here. And someone makes an offhand comment. Well, 80% of dust is human skin cells. It's like
is it true?
Inside joke. I don't know. I think I've heard that's like a popular idea that's maybe debunked at this point, but it's something that people say. But in this case, it's ironic because it is true. This is supposedly the ash of the crew's bodies, because the only thing that we see burned when they go exploring the ship are the crew, most of whom were torched up by the sun itself in that famous viewing chamber.
And the viewing chamber door was closed. I guess Pinbacker's probably been going in and and out of.
Yeah, but like their bodies are mostly intact. One of them breaks apart while they're fucking with it, but like their bodies are still in the shape of bodies. So I get that there's some dust in the ship, but this is a huge ship, and every single surface, there's like constantly these shots of them like, oh, let me go try to read out this old computer screen, and they're brushing dust off everything. It's half an inch of caked ash over every single surface in this gigantic ship. I'm like, what else burned? Or is it these people were gigantic? I don't know. There's a lot of ash.
I think it was the architects from Prometheus, like the people that are like 80 feet tall.
Oh yeah, it was one of those was in there. He burned up.
One of those guys.
Oh, you got ash everywhere, man.
I don't know. Maybe we're reading too much into it, but that also stuck out to me. Like this doesn't feel like the proportions are correct.
Yeah, because there's so much that it nags at your mind. You're like, wait a minute, is there not going to be some other explanation for the rest of the ash? Like what else went on in the ship that they didn't get around to showing us?
This is when the movie really starts feeling like a horror movie to an extent too, because we get all the little flash cuts of the dead crew, like in their happy moments, photos they have of them and their families. Did that work for you?
I liked that because they were sort of inserted subliminally. They were scary, but they weren't done as jump scares. They weren't punctuated with noises or music. So it was in the silence as they were walking quietly through this quiet ship, and it would just be a few frames of a close-up on part of this photo. And I wasn't even sure after the fact whether they were showing the photo. It was like the farewell group photo of one of the crews, but I'm not sure it wasn't our crew, not this Icarus 1 crew. It might have been the photo that they show later that shows all the people we know from the Icarus 2, or at least there was a similar photo shown later that had the sort of same
I think
vibe.
It was the Icarus one. I didn't freeze frame on any of it.
Yeah.
That was my impression.
So maybe it's just drawing this comparison because later on they do show the crew that we know from the Icarus 2 in a very similar photo, all looking up and smiling at the camera, getting ready to leave Earth.
Whatever international organization is in charge of this mission just has one pose.
Yeah,
they make you do it before you leave. So.
Yeah, and they charge you
they
charge you $25 if you want the printout.
Right, and you can get the star background, you can get the meadows. You've got some options. All right, you want to take us through the end of the movie?
All right, let's see how this thing ended. Starting their approach to the drop zone, the ship's computer tells the remaining crew members there's not enough oxygen for all 5 of them aboard to complete the mission. But there's only 4 survivors, right? Wrong. Someone else is on the ship, and Kappa goes to investigate. Kappa is then attacked by a tall, naked man covered in burns.
Hate when that happens.
Who turns out to be Captain Pinbacker of the Icarus, driven mad and determined to sabotage this mission just as he did his own. Pinbacker kills the ship's botanist Corazon and disables the mainframe by pulling it out of its coolant tanks. Engineer Mace dies heroically in restarting the computer, allowing Kappa to make it to the payload chamber. There, Kappa faces down Pinbacker and starts the atomic chain reaction just in the nick of time. And back on Earth, the sun shines a little brighter.
Rare moment of happiness in this movie.
It's funny that you went through all this serious movie, very little brightness, and then they're like, okay, Danny Boyle has a heart, which we know from his other movies, but he's just going to give you the sweet, happy ending. It's Kappa's sister and her little kids, and the sun is out today. Everything's all right.
Happy in quotes, because everyone's dead on the crew that we came to know over the course of the movie. They're extremely dead. I can't get any deader than that. They're piles of ash. Yeah. But getting to that point, it's not the smoothest ride. This is the section of the movie that's very controversial. And I think we can understand why. Wildly different movie in this last section than we've become accustomed to, right?
And even right up to before the discovery that there's some evil villain lurking, it gets to some really gritty human drama part where they're like, they already knew there wasn't quite enough oxygen. And they're like, Trey's been on suicide watch. He's been fully sedated since that first incident, and maybe we're going to have to kill him. And it's this realistic human drama, and they're talking about voting, and Cassie refuses to say she's on board with it, but Mace is like, I got to do it anyway, because it's the only way we're going to survive to finish this mission. And then they go and they discover that he's already killed himself. So it's this real human drama. And then just after that, it shifts into something which is maybe supernatural. We can debate whether it's intended to be supernatural or just elevated sci-fi realism.
Well, Danny Boyle will not give you a clear answer on the supernatural versus real sci-fi question either. It feels like making Pinbacker this force of nature was something that happened more in the editing room than during filming because they weren't happy with how he looked. So cutting him in these brief glimpses, this blur effect they use on him when he moves was done primarily out of utility to hide how he looked because they weren't really super thrilled with how the prosthetic burns looked all over his body. So then they had to pivot and make a different movie than they were originally making, which makes a lot of sense when you watch the finished product.
I ended up liking that part of it. For me, that sort of, it adds a layer to it where you can't tell what he's supposed to be. Is he distorting reality around him? Like you said, is that a supernatural effect? Is this just our way to understand understand the psychology of these characters who are all pretty far gone and exhausted. And when there's suddenly this dangerous man in their midst, they can't even focus on him. They can't reckon with what they're dealing with. So it has different implications.
Like a Lovecraftian element almost.
It is, because you can't see the guy. Unlike your typical slasher movie, there's a lot of suspense. And then there's that moment when the monster, whatever it is full frame and clear in a way that lets you see everything. Like, you never see this guy. Even while he's killing you, you're like squinting and you're like, I can't see who's slashing me right now with the space scalpel. What the fuck's going on?
Kappa gets the best look at him, I guess, on the other side of the airlock, right? They have an elongated stare down.
Oh, yeah. Face to face, right? Dead in the eyes.
All we're really getting is, like his forehead and eyes. We know it's Pinbacker.
Yes.
Just from context clues and people actually say it. But I actually forgot before I sat down to rewatch it for the podcast that he is brought up earlier in the movie a few times. Like, he does have a presence in the first and second act. I remembered it being much more out of nowhere. So I do give the movie a little credit for planting the seeds, but it's still not a compelling villain for this. I can't help but think, why not just have Cliff Curtis as Searles, who's going crazy in the exact same way we've come to understand that Pinbacker's crazy now, be that guy. You know,
Right.
He's someone you know and you're connected with and you have some kind of attachment. It would just raise the stakes a little more, I thought.
Yeah, your suggestion I think is great. I think it makes a lot of sense. It would help make the movie more palatable for people, because you're going from this hard sci-fi into a slasher film with a guy chasing you down the corridors of a spaceship. But if it was a guy that we knew, it would have just felt more like a story that we can make meaning out of. I don't think there's anything wrong with doing it this way, but I do think that people take meaning out of stories when they go, I saw that coming, or I should have seen it coming. And this is a movie where you're like, I didn't see that coming and you couldn't have expected me to. So it feels a little harder to relate to the story for that reason.
I also think it cheapens it, because think of the movies we're comparing it to now. Event Horizon, which, as much as we like it, it's not prestige cinema, or as you brought up, like slasher movies. Whereas the first part of the movie seemed much more like elevated sci-fi, like 2001 or Close Encounters, like that kind of vibe. And now we're down in the dirt with it, talking about, Alien. Not that Alien's a bad movie, obviously, but it seemed like the movie was more intellectual, and now it's taken this hard turn into just bloodletting.
Exactly. And not to only reference movies that we've covered, but it's getting into Jason X territory, right? It's just slasher on a ship.
Luckily, they don't have a cargo bay just full of hooks yet. Not that we've seen.
It's slightly better set design. But there is a space scalpel involved, which is not too different from the space machete, which was actually a surgical tool in that movie.
And I'm pretty sure Weir used the space scalpel to spill out Jason Patrick's guts all over everything.
That's true. He was using medical gear.
Was it Jason Isaac or Jason Patrick? It was Jason Isaacs.
Jason Isaacs, yep.
Yeah, we're in well-trodden territory now for a movie that felt like it was trying to be a little different, a little elevated.
So I brought over this quote, which I found in an old interview that's linked off the Wikipedia page. And Danny Boyle comments on this, like, why did you go so way out there in the third act? And he says, I always love taking a huge risk in films where you risk everything by doing something that breaks the pattern. So that was always the plan, to take you and see how far we could stretch realism, push it as hard as we could.
Realism, though? Like, you're pushing the realism past the point where you could be plausible any longer.
And people make the comparison in Train Spotting. Ewan McGregor dives down the toilet and you're like, okay, that can't really happen.
There's also like a baby on the ceiling when he's tripping.
But this is, I don't
Different,
know.
man.
It's different because it's literal, right? This is really the thing that happens that makes it hard for them to execute the mission, and they have to overcome it.
Yeah, this is a tangible obstacle for the crew. This is the last thing standing between them and saving humanity. It is not a drug addict's hallucination.
They have to literally defeat the monster in order to set off the bomb. And then
So-
it doesn't get any more real there, right? Because Kappa has this surreal moment where he greets the sun, or some combination of the sun and the atomic reaction are happening. Time stands still, and he just has this very pleasant, happy moment where he's, oh, hello, sunshine. This is lovely.
You could say he's staring at the sun. And this section does have some real good human drama, like you brought up. And then, yeah, I'm not sure what to make of it.
In the end, it was fun on its own. You just have to be okay with going there with it. As a slasher movie, it was a very stylish slasher movie. So you're like, okay, I wasn't watching a slasher movie until now, but now I am. And it's a cool one. And if you're okay with that, you can be okay with the end of the movie.
I guess.
It sounds like you're not okay with the end of the movie.
I don't know, man. It was a solid like 9 out of 10 until the third act. And now I got to drop it down to like a 7, 6.5. I don't know.
Yeah, I
wanted more from it.
If Searle had just gone crazy and done something scary that fucked them up and not gained superhuman strength the way Pinbacker seems to be able to lift Kappa off the ground with one hand, if he'd just done something where it's, oh shit, Searle really went over the edge, sabotaged our mission, it would have been a perfectly good movie and still had that element element of, does the sun drive a man insane? These interesting questions.
And it was foreshadowed. Like you said, one of the first lines in the movie is about how the psych officer is going crazy.
Yeah, it would have come
Maybe
around.
it was too heavily foreshadowed.
Yeah.
In a sense, you might have to weaken it a little bit.
You could do a twist on it, but there's all kind of twists that are shy of the ex-captain is a scary super monster.
Right. There's more interesting ways to take it. I feel like Cassie got a raw deal at the end here.
Yeah.
She's brought up to be one of the survivors. Well, temporary survivors. It's her, Kappa, and Pinbacker, and she just goes catatonic too. We don't really know what happened between her and Pinbacker to put her in that state. She's very much alive and just dead-eyed.
Yeah, we find her in the same cross-legged posture that we see Michelle Yeoh in later on, although we thought we saw her stabbed and fall on her face. Then they go back to her and she's again sitting up. And then that's the same way we find Cassie. There's some kind of symbolism in this, like what Pinbacker does to people or how he leaves them. But then Kappa gets in a fight with Pinbacker and she revives enough to run up and
deglove him, essentially. Not a scene I needed in this movie.
Pushes Kappa over the edge. He grabs onto Pinbacker's arm and the skin comes with him and they go sliding down the thing. But then, like you said, yeah, she was established as this other very humane, very soulful character who was a nice pairing with Kappa. And then in the end, they slide down the edge of the thing and then she just goes, finish him. And that's her final line in the movie.
Like Shang Tsung from Mortal Kombat.
She does a Mortal Kombat ending. She says, finish him. And then she croaks, but they don't even show it. There's no sort of tender moment of leaving her behind. Kappa just runs to go detonate the bomb, and then it's about him after that.
Not the strongest ending. It feels like maybe it could have benefited from some reshoots they didn't have the money or they couldn't get everyone back together for. So they had to make the movie in the editing room in that sense a little bit. I don't know. I have nothing to back that up in terms of interviews or behind the scenes gossip. It's just the vibe I got.
Yeah, it does feel flawed in a way that the rest of the film feels a little more thoroughly planned out.
So that was Sunshine. Do you want to hear what happened to the people involved?
I hope they're okay.
I'm not even going to bother going into the cast because everyone in the cast is fine. This movie it was a bomb for sure. It lost money theatrically, but it wasn't really given a chance to succeed. So I don't think any of the actors were held accountable or even any of the creative team at all. They've all gone on to do other stuff, noteworthy stuff. It's one of those happy stories where the movie bombed, even though it's good, and nobody really took the brunt of the blame.
Yeah.
So Danny Boyle, he retired after this. He hasn't done anything. No,
that's too bad. I thought he had a chance at maybe winning an Oscar if he would have made one more movie.
You would think so. Oh, no, actually, the next movie he made after this was Slumdog Millionaire, which he won an Oscar for Best Director and Best Picture. And he's been making stuff even after that. He made 127 Hours, the James Franco Trapped Under a Rock movie. If only he were really trapped under a rock. Then he made Trance, which I've never seen or even heard of until I started researching it, and Steve Jobs. Of course, I've heard of Steve Jobs. It's both the person and the movie, but I have not seen the movie yet. But it was a flop, so he could cover Steve Jobs if he wanted to.
Might be interesting.
Then he would go make a sequel, his first one, because he was not the director of 28 Weeks Later, as we established. And he made T2 Trainspotting. Do you think they called it T2 as a joke? That has to be a joke.
Yeah, because someone else made a sequel called T2. I can't think of what that was.
Like the original T was bigger in that one, and the sequel was much bigger. So it does feel like a little bit of a cheeky joke. Cheeky Boyle. I like it. That was disappointing financially. Got mixed reviews. And then he made Yesterday, which was a big hit. Came out, was that 2019, I think? Semi-recent. And it made a ton of money. It got mixed reviews. Some of the weaker reviews of his career, honestly. Most of his movies are very well received. He was supposed to direct No Time to Die, dropped out over creative differences, didn't like the direction that the studio wanted him to go in with it. It would eventually pass to Cary Fukunaga, who is now, I guess, a sex pest and semi-canceled. We'll see what happens there. That's new within the last couple weeks.
Okay, I got to catch up, man. Hollywood moves fast.
But Boyle is not done. He's directing Methuselah next, with Michael B. Jordan, an action adventure about a man who is 1,000 years old and has used his time on Earth to develop an unparalleled set of survival skills. Sounds kind of cheesy for Danny Boyle, doesn't it?
It sounds fun, but yes, cheesy. I have a very specific set of survival skills. It's all of them. I've been studying for 1,000 fucking years, man.
I like Michael B. Jordan. I like Danny Boyle. I'll check it out. He's also the creator of Pistol, the new FX series about the Sex Pistols, and I think he directed some of the episodes, if not all.
Interesting.
I don't know. Fuck Johnny Rotten. Seems like a dick. And then written, of course, by Alex Garland, as we mentioned in the monologue, but we didn't really talk about Garland's screenplay at all. Garland now is a hipster favorite as a director, not just a writer.
He's been
doing the damn thing on the silver screen. Like we mentioned, wrote the novel The Beach, and then he wrote Never Let Me Go, which is a great movie that I dearly love, also based on a novel that Garland did not write. So he adapted the novel into a screenplay. And he wrote Dread, which we will be covering. It's on the schedule. We keep having to push it back because other stuff comes up. But he also essentially ghost directed Dread.
Yeah, that
would be fun.
impressive.
There's a lot to dive into behind the scenes there. The studio did not like what the original director was doing, and they liked what Alex Garland was suggesting, so they basically told him, you direct it, and he did. And then he would go on to make Ex Machina, which is great, and Annihilation, which is also great, and Men, which I have not seen yet. It's wildly divisive, apparently.
Okay, very curious about that.
Huge failure financially, so we can cover it if we want. I think Ex Machina might not have lost money, but Annihilation definitely did.
Well,
Definitely
that's right.
did. Yeah, Annihilation we're going to be covering at some point as well. And then he created the show Devs. So he's been staying busy. And I hope he still gets money to make stuff, because none of his stuff makes any money.
Annihilation feels like it was already a cult classic at the time it was failing. It was like beloved, but a loser.
Yeah, I think people were like, please go see this in theaters, because it got a quick theatrical straight to Netflix like a week later release thing.
Right. Okay.
So people were just like, I'll wait.
Yeah.
I'm guilty of it. I didn't see it in theaters. I knew it was coming to Netflix any day. And I was like, I'll just wait. I wish I had, because I bet it'd be really cool to see on the big screen. Some of the visuals and sound in that movie is super impressive.
He's a talent.
That's how you know I know about movies. I say things like the visuals and the sound in the movie. It's very impressive. I could use words like that, technical terms, if you will.
Hopefully our audience will understand, though, because they are very sophisticated.
They're smart, yeah.
As we are.
They're film buffs like us. There's not a ton of behind-the-scenes drama with this movie. Oscar Isaac auditioned. He didn't get the part. He would have been good.
He would have totally fit in. It would have been fantastic in this. It's almost like he's in there. Wasn't he in this? Yeah, he was the guy who was always in the other room.
Right. He was just one room away. But he talked up the script so much that when Garland was making Ex Machina, he was like, all right, I'll cast Oscar Isaac in it. He's a big fan of my stuff. And then in Annihilation as well. So our whole Searles, Cliff Curtis as pinbacker theory, maybe there's more to it that just everyone's been very tight-lipped about, because Cliff Curtis did have to leave the movie halfway through filming. He had a death in the family. I believe his father passed away. So he left with still a couple weeks left in shooting, and they used a stand-in for a lot of his scenes. Maybe that's why he was, staring at the sun so often, because you could envelop him in light.
Yeah, just to
let him the features a little bit.
Interesting.
Maybe he was supposed to have a bigger part. That speaks to what I'm saying, though. It feels like a movie that was made in the editing room.
Yeah, that makes for interesting fodder for a fan theory like yours. Maybe he would have been more central to the ending.
Or joined Pinbacker at least and been able to explain some of his motivations a little more.
Yeah.
Outside of like, the sun is cool and we shouldn't mess with it. Like that was Pinbacker's grand proclamation, essentially, right?
That's the other unsatisfying thing now that you bring it up. I think Pinbacker's main point was like, he wanted to be the last man alive. He had this poem about the last man standing before God alone. And he's like, yeah, that's going to be me. I want that to be me. Is everyone else dead yet? Everyone needs to die. And like that,
just told him yes. That he probably like, how's he gonna fucking fact check you?
Yeah, that's what he asked when Kappa walks into the room and discovers him, and he's like, "Are you an angel? Is this it? Is everyone else dead? Because that's what I've been waiting for." And then he's disappointed to find out no. But that kind of doesn't tie in with space madness and sunshine madness and the way being close to the sun drives you crazy. I couldn't find the thread in that. It was just like another reason why this character stood out as shoehorned in.
He's just like the embodiment of vitamin D deficiency, or what's the opposite of deficiency? Abundance?
Yeah, overabundance.
All right, Ian, did you have a summarizing final thought that you wanted to share with the listeners?
I have a thought, but it's kind of half-baked, like Dr. Searles' face. And my thought is that I applaud Danny Boyle and Alex Garland for making this movie because I like this genre. I don't think it hangs together in every way, but it's, like we said, it's lovely to look at. Does a lot of smart and sophisticated things as it goes along. But then the next thing you would say is people should make more stabs at conceptual sci-fi like this. Hollywood should make more of these movies. And I'm like, well, I'm not sure, because most people aren't as talented as Danny Boyle and Alex Garland. You could say Event Horizon was one of those other conceptual sci-fis that had people who were not nearly as heady and clever as the people making this. But
are you saying Paul W.S. Anderson is not on the level of Danny Boyle as a filmmaker?
He may not be quite Boyle tier, but we still ended up recommending that movie too. So maybe I'm being too negative. This one's way easier.
Pandorum or Underwater. I mean, these are all kind of spins on the same story, and they all kind of work, in my opinion.
So maybe my negativity was overblown there, and I should say, you know what? Go for it. Hollywood, please make us more conceptual, hard sci-fi, weird sci-fi, horror sci-fi, and go watch this movie. But, wear your sunglasses.
Wear your sunglasses. Don't go sunshine crazy, guys. We don't need that. But yeah, that was Sunshine. If it wasn't clear, a hearty recommendation, I think, from both of us, just with some reservations. But visually stunning. The score is fantastic. Listen to the score on Spotify, even if you don't watch the movie, but you should watch the movie.
Watch it on the best screen you can. Turn down the lights in the room and really get into it.
The track by John Murphy, Sunshine, Adagio in D minor, is fucking fantastic. I can't recommend it highly enough.
It is stirring.
It is stirring. So that was Sunshine. We're going to be back next week with True Romance. romance, which will be fun.
Looking forward to that.
I don't know what to say about it. It's true romance. Like, it's a classic. Everyone knows True Romance.
Well, everyone but me, because I don't know shit. And I avoided this movie because I thought I was scared of movies that showed gritty violence. And that was before I could deal with Tarantino, before I could deal with David Lynch, who I still can't deal with. But
I still can't deal with Cronenberg. I'm not seeing Crimes of the Future.
Yeah,
Shit still
exactly.
freaks me out.
Yes. But I'm ready to swallow this film now. I'm ready to deal with it because I think I can understand where Tarantino's coming from, and it's filtered through the lens of Tony Scott. So all that being said, I'm excited to see this. I'm excited to talk about it with you next week.
It is violent, but also Val Kilmer plays an Elvis angel who comes down and gives visions. So it's not gritty. It's kind of silly at the same time. So it's a good time. If you haven't seen it yet, try to watch it before next week so you can follow along. And please remember to rate, review, subscribe to the pod. If you're listening and enjoying it, you can leave reviews on a bunch of different platforms, but especially Apple Podcasts. Spotify lets you review now.
Really helps us.
Yeah, it helps new listeners find us, helps us get higher rankings, which leads to new listeners, which is just good for everyone. So we'll see you next time in the Blast Zone.
See you next time in the Blast Zone.
The Blast Zone.